evening, we have the pleasure of a special guest presenter, Ms. Gail Prensky. I'd like to have Gail come up, please. Gail is founding producer and director of the Jüdische Kulturbund Project. She'll be telling you a great deal about her work, and I think you're going to find the next 20 minutes to be quite inspiring. And she'll tell you also about the musicians that are participating. Gail, welcome.
I am so happy to be here. I really welcome you all for this Holocaust commemoration. And I want to thank you and the Peck Humanities Institute for inviting me to speak this evening, as well as the support and kindness by all of those who helped prepare me for this event, including Sarah Duffy, Dawn Avery, Ken Jassy, Rachel Wilson, and Albert Kapikian. And a special thanks to the musicians from Montgomery College, Lauren Gray on flute, Billy Conan on bassoon, and Mike Langlois on piano, who will be performing through my presentation. And I want to thank you all for coming here to hear about Playing for Life, Art Under Tyranny, presented by the Jüdische Kulturbund Project, an initiative I found years ago to tell the story of artists and musicians responding to oppression in the most powerful ways through their art, and showing how their story is relevant today. I really love telling this story. About 10 years ago, I learned about the story of Jewish musicians and performing artists in Berlin in 1933, when they were fired from their jobs in places like the State Opera, the Staatsoper, the Berlin Philharmonic. They were fired because they were Jews. A small group of Jewish artists met, and what they decided in response to their being fired was extraordinary. Led by Kurt Singer, its artistic director, they would propose to the Nazis that they organize their own cultural association for Jews only. They wanted to be self-sustaining through membership subscription. Kurt Singer delivered their proposal to Joseph Goebbels' Office of Propaganda and Enlightenment. Surprisingly, the Nazis approved their proposal. The Kulturbund understood that the Nazis would oversee their organization and improve all of their activities. And so, in 1933, the Jewish Cultural League of German Jews called Der Kulturbund Deutscher Juden was born. By the way, these images that you're looking at, these paintings are by Charlotte Solomon. Charlotte was a teenager from a prominent family in Berlin. And while she was hiding in southern France between 1941 and 43, she painted hundreds of pictures, some depicting the beginning of the Kulturbund. Charlotte was captured and sent to Auschwitz in 1943. There she and her unborn child perished. In 1935, the organization came to be known as Jüdische Kulturbund, the Jewish Cultural Association. The Kulturbund performed operas, symphonies, and dramas and gave lectures in 42 cities around Germany. This is not a small thing either. The level of performances were comparable to what is seen at Lincoln Center, the Metropolitan Opera, and others. Some of the finest actors and musicians of Germany were members. Since I learned the story, I am still amazed by the idea of artists responding to their expulsion from jobs in their homeland by organizing as they did, and am perplexed by the Nazis sanctioning their plan. On the one hand, the formation of the Kulturbund was an act of defiance by the Jewish artists, and for some of the artists, they thought they were safe, performing in a haven away from the gradual darkness covering them outside the theater. For the Nazis, we believe the Kulturbund was a propaganda tool to tell the world that the Jews were fine, And perhaps it was a way for the Nazis to contain the Jews. It was certainly the beginning of marginalizing, repressing, and ultimately squeezing them out of society. For the Kulturbund, did it ultimately prevent some artists from leaving sooner? Did it provide them with a false sense of security? Or did it succeed in defying the Nazis and provide a way for many artists to survive? Maybe the Kulturbund were all of these things. I started this project to capture these Kulturbund artists' experiences and issues, and to explain how the Kulturbund is relevant today. My first task was to interview as many survivors as I could locate. I filmed 15 interviews. Most of those subjects have since died. One of those I interviewed attended Kulturbund performances. She remembers the Barber of Seville. I interviewed performers, an actor, a dancer and choreographer, and several musicians. And I interviewed a seamstress who altered the same costumes over and over again for many performances. The interviews were moving, as the subjects described their memories of living in Germany at the time, their experiences in the Kulturbund, and of the performances in which they played. A common theme for all of them: the power of music, the resiliency of the human spirit, and the will to survive. In collaboration with an extraordinary creative team, including John King, who is here tonight, and James Egan, both my production partners, Mark Jonathan Harris, a 3-time Oscar-winning film director, David Schweitzer, the theater director, and Jared Mazaki, the multimedia playwright and projection designer, we are producing Playing for Life, Art Under Tyranny, a multimedia play, a documentary film, and education program. We will tell the story of the Kulturbund and those of today's artists and how they respond to living under oppression, spanning the time from 1933 to the present. Artists of the Kulturbund impacted not just German and Jewish culture, but culture in other lands. I want to share some of these artists with you today. The students of Montgomery College will perform excerpts from a selection of music that some of the Kulturbund artists remember performing. I also want to add that for each piece shared with you this evening, they hold significance, a meaning within the story by the composer. I can only guess that the Kulturbund selected them because of their significance, their meaning. Ernst Leonard was an actor who joined the Kulturbund in 1933. In 1936, Ernst left for New York, met William Morris, the agent. Then he moved to Hollywood, where he acted and became a photographer, developing the first screen tests. His first client was Tony Curtis. His last performance was a year before he died. He played a Nazi perpetrator in the film Walk on Water. He called me when he got the part. He was so excited about the opportunity. He said, "Imagine, I am playing a Nazi perpetrator." Soon after Ernst joined the Kulturbund, he performed there in the first production in October 1933 in the theater on Charlottenstrasse in Berlin. It was the play Nathan the Wise, written by Gotthold Ephraim Lessing. Nathan the Wise is a story about tolerance between Muslims, Christians, and Jews in Palestine. When the Nazis saw the performance, they shut it down, never allowing the Kulturbund to perform it again. Yuri Teplitz was a flutist joining the Frankfurt Kulturbund in 1934. One of the first performances in which he played was Mendelssohn's Violin Concerto. It was a special piece because the German orchestras did not play Mendelssohn anymore. The reason the orchestras did not play Mendelssohn was because the Nazis believed he was a Jew. Mendelssohn's family was Jewish, but he was baptized Christian. It did not matter if his bloodline was Jewish. 1936, Yuri left for Palestine along with the conductor William Steinberg and others from the Frankfurt Kulturbund to help start Bronislaw Huberman's Palestine Symphony Orchestra, which is today the Israeli Philharmonic. Martha Hirsch was 16 or 17 when she joined the Frankfurt Kulturbund in 1934 as a pianist and organist. She left in 1938 when Joseph Goebbels closed all of the Kulturbund theaters except for the one in Berlin, which remained open until 1941. While performing in the Frankfurt Kulturbund, Martha remembers performing Beethoven's Fidelio. The Fidelio opera is a central work of Beethoven's so-called middle period, and like some of Beethoven's music of this time, it emphasizes heroism. The story also engaged Beethoven's strong feelings about the struggle for political liberty that was taking place in Europe in his day. Marguerite Waxman was the daughter of the founding artistic director of the Kulturbund, Kurt Singer. She attended many of her father's concerts and remembers in 1936 when the Kulturbund performed Shalom Aleichem. This was an extraordinary event. Up until the time, the Kulturbund played music by the great composers of Europe, Bach, Beethoven, Brahms, Schubert, Bizet, and Mozart. But in 1936, the Nazis instructed the Kulturbund that they could no longer play music by Austrian or German composers. They could only play Jewish and Yiddish music. However, Kurt Singer and his musicians did not know what this music was. Reluctant at first to embrace Jewish and Yiddish music, they came to enjoy it and included special programs to perform them. Shalom Aleichem was one of these performances. Marguerite's father, Kurt Singer, was passionate about the Kulturbund. In fact, he believed that he and the Kulturbund were special and protected by the Nazis. In 1938, he left Berlin for the Netherlands and then went on to the United States, where he was offered an academic job at Harvard University. Reevaluating his departure from Germany and the Kulturbund, he returned. Eventually, he was sent to Theresienstadt, where he died from illness. Marguerite, her sister and mother, immigrated to Israel. Singer's grandchildren and great-grandchildren live there today. Kurt Michaelis was an oboist, joining the Berlin Kulturbund in 1937, replacing an oboist who left for Palestine to join the new orchestra there in 1936. Kurt told me about a memorable concert, The Resurrection, Gustav Mahler's Second Symphony. The performance took place in February 1941. It was a selection that the performers offered for themselves and the audience to encourage hope and that they would endure and rise again despite suffering and oppression. He left the Berlin Kulturbund in June 1941. He was one of the last to get a visa and leave for America with his 2 oboes and English horn. After auditioning with various orchestras, he got his first job in New Orleans, then went on to perform in Kansas City, then with the Russian Ballet, traveling all over the United States. Kurt is sure that without the Kulturbund, everything that happened to him afterwards would have been impossible. He thought it was a miracle that Kurt Singer hired him, and he was able to live day by day and survive the Nazis. His oboe is part of the collection at the United States Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. Henry Meyer played violin and viola for the Kulturbund between 1939 and 1941. Henry met the conductor Rudolf Schwartz at a bus stop in Berlin one day and was invited to audition for the Kulturbund Orchestra. Only 16 years old, he was the youngest performer of the Berlin Kulturbund. Carl Nielsen's The Inextinguishable Symphony was the last performance of the Kulturbund. Nielsen wrote in his notes that the symphony applies to that which is inextinguishable and the will to live, which made it appropriate for the Kulturbund to play the symphony on the day the organization closed in September, on the 11th day in 1941. When the Kulturbund closed, Henry, like others who stayed with the orchestra until the end, was sent to the camps. He barely survived Auschwitz. He came to the United States, where he became a professor at the Cincinnati Conservatory of Music and was a founding member of the LaSalle Quartet. While the Kulturbund is a unique and little-known story about thousands of artists from one country who organized in response to the Nazi oppression, repression, and near ultimate extinction, today's artists around the world respond to their oppression through their art. We want to explore how artists today might connect to the Kulturbund and the issues they face, the choice to stay or leave their homeland, and what the ramifications of their choice mean. We also want to look at the issue of identity and the power of art and music. We have talked with more than 24 artists around the world, including Afghanistan, Argentina, Burma, Cambodia, Chile, Congo, DRC, India, Iran, Mali, Niger, North Korea, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Uganda, and Ukraine. While the Nazis did not allow the Kulturbund to film their performances or record their music, today we have the advantage of technology and social media that break down the barriers despite dictators that try to squash their attempts to let the outside world know about them. I'd like to share with you examples of our collaborating artists. Manira Hashemi is a performing artist from Afghanistan, now in exile in Sweden, as is one of her brothers and his family. Her parents, 2 sisters, and another brother live in Berlin. She and her family fled in 2012 after years of threats and abuse by the community for being Hazara, for being women who worked outside the home and worked as performing artists, which is akin to those in Afghanistan as being a prostitute. Manira's father and brothers defended and supported her and her 2 sisters, and as a result, they were assaulted. Manira is an accomplished actor, director, and playwright. Her 2 sisters are actors, her brothers are musicians. Arn Chornpan is a musician living in Cambodia. Arn came from a family who owned an opera company. When the Khmer Rouge took power in the 1970s, they targeted artists, sending them to the camps and killing many of them. Arn was sent to a camp where he learned how to play music. He says music saved his life. While in the camp, he was made to play for the Khmer Rouge guards, and while victims were being tortured and killed. He eventually was given a rifle, like many boys, sent into the jungle to kill the Khmer Rouge enemies near the Thai border. He fled, escaping to a refugee camp where he met an American man. The man took Arn back to New Hampshire and adopted him. After a full education, Arn started Cambodia Living Arts to support and educate Cambodians, teaching them music and giving them a better life. He now lives in Cambodia. Xian Gu is a multimedia artist from China, now living in Vancouver, Canada. When he was a teenager, Xian Gu was separated from his family and sent into forced labor in rural China during the Cultural Revolution between 1966 and 1976. He was so scared and alone. There he began drawing, capturing his feelings of living in deprivation and in isolation. Surviving the labor camp, he took with him notebooks filled with visual records of his life. They documented all that he endured. Xian Gu teaches and continues freely to do his art in Vancouver. He paints and does 3D dimensional installations and performs in performance pieces. Joan Belmar is a visual artist working in mixed media. He was born in Chile and now lives in Tacoma Park, Maryland. As a young boy, Joan grew up in Chile under the dictatorship of Pinochet in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. His mother worked in a factory. One day, Joan remembers walking over a bridge where he saw bodies floating. As he got older, aware that he was gay and had a strong design and artistic talent, he knew he would have to leave because in Chile, the penalty for homosexuality was death. Expressing one's artistic ideas was risky. In 1995, Joan fled Spain, leaving behind his family, where he experienced freedom for the first time. Later, Joan came to the United States and became a citizen. Recently, Joan exhibited his work at the Addison Ripley Fine Art in D.C. and the McLean Project for the Arts in Virginia. Alpha D is a fashion designer from Niger, Mali, now living in Silver Spring, Maryland, and Paris. Alpha D was born in Niger and eventually moved to Mali. He fled from Mali years ago when the extremists threatened his life for supporting the rights and economic independence of women and providing them with beauty. Al-Fadi is an extraordinary talented designer who combines Mali fabric design with couture fashion. His work can be seen every year in Paris. He has a school in Mali where he educates others in design. And with the assistance of UNESCO and other organizations, Al-Fadi has started his next initiative to build a university of fashion in Niger, for which the government is giving him land. Kim Young-soon. She is a performing artist from North Korea, now living in South Korea. Young-soon was a choreographer and dancer until 1970 when she married and started raising children. This was during Kim Il-sung's rule. One day, the authorities arrested and took away her husband. A month later, she was taken to a national security agency building for interrogation. There, she was told to write in a notebook everything about her life and everyone she knew. After 2 months, she and her family, her parents and 4 children, were sent to a concentration camp called Yoda. Her parents died of malnutrition. One son was shot and killed trying to escape. Another son was left on the ground outside her home in the camp, dead from drowning. After 9 years, she and her 2 surviving children, a son and a daughter, were freed. She adopted out her teenage daughter to a farmer for a better life. Years later, she learned why she was sent to the concentration camp. She knew a secret that no one was to know, which she had revealed in those interrogation notes. She was friends with the actress who would become the mistress of Kim Jong-il, and who later gave birth to a son, who, by the way, is today's North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un's older half-brother. 15 years since her release from the Yoda concentration camp, Young-soon and her son escaped, finding their way to South Korea. There she wrote a book and then choreographed a dance as part of the theater production about the Yoda concentration camp. When I asked Young-soon, now in her 70s, how she could survive such pain and loss, she said that every day she embraces freedom in every moment of life. Young-soon is a human rights activist fighting for the rights of North Koreans. Tarika Kenneth Desiree is a performing artist living in Uganda. Today, Ugandans are experiencing increased oppression with the parliament passing a law allowing police more power while restricting people's rights. People are not allowed to gather in public places or express dissent and criticism of government policies. Police may use firearms to shoot and kill protesters and bystanders in demonstrations. Media outlets are targeted and closed down, and threats are made against civil society groups and journalists whose work involves government policy and human rights, particularly the rights of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. Tarika shared examples of how this mandate was used against people where he lives. In June 2010, Tarika was part of an audience that was watching some documentary films in the Watoto Church about human rights when police raided the church and blocked the screening of the film about the trial of prominent members of the leadership of the defeated Nazis in Germany after World War II. In October 2012, The State of the Nation, a local production by a local playwright, John Sagawa, was deemed incisive and a threat to patriotism, since it highlighted critical issues like corruption and bad governance in Uganda. The play was banned immediately after the premiere. Tarika is a professional dancer and choreographer, as well as the founder of the Yuda Convicts Dance Company. Since starting in 2006, Yuda Convicts' mission is to transform society through dance. Through dance, performances communicate and educate the audiences about the things that affect society. In Uganda, there is much to say. I want to thank you all for allowing me to share the faces, the music, the art, and the stories of the artists who define our project. They motivate me every day. These artists are brave, generous, and appreciative of what we are doing on our project. We are grateful to them for allowing us to tell their stories to you. Our project's desire is to introduce you and others to the Kulturbund and today's artists and show you how they respond to oppression through their art. It is our hope that through our efforts in Playing for Light, Art Under Tyranny, the project will bring a collective voice for today's artists, as well as bring an awareness about what others are experiencing elsewhere. We believe that these artists are the best of humanity and encourage all of us to be tolerant of our differences, live in peace, allow us to express ourselves freely, and support healthy discussions about issues without threatening our lives. In closing, we hope that you will stay in touch with us. We'd like to let you know about our upcoming events, including one at the Clarice Smith Performing Arts Center in the late autumn. We are planning to launch our stage production, Playing for Life, in Washington, D.C. in the spring of 2016. Thanks so much.